Hello there. My name is Sebastian Straub and I'm the Principal Solutions Architect at N2WS. And this time in this video, I'm going to show you how to perform a configuration for S3 repositories and also how to create an S3 archive. First things first. The first thing we'll need is an S3 bucket. So let's go to our S3 Management Console. Let's click on Create Bucket. Here you can now create an S3 bucket. I'm going to call mine N2WS-intro-S3. And I want this to be created in North Virginia. Then click on Next. Now, what you want to do here is you want to turn on encryption. So that's the button right here. Select that. Click on Next. Now, this is exactly what we want. We want to block all public access. We don't want anybody else snooping into our S3 bucket. I'm going to click on Next. This is just an overview of everything that we've selected up to this point. Now let's click on Create Bucket. There we go. Now we have our S3 bucket, N2WS-intro-S3. Let's go back to our console. So now we're going to choose S3 repositories. You'll find this here on the left side of the navigation screen. All right, now we can give it a name, and this doesn't have to be the same as the S3 bucket name, but you can if you want to. So in my case, I'm going to call it N2WS_intro_S3. Now over here you have to choose the region where that bucket exists. That's in North Virginia, and you can also choose the bucket name itself. There it is, N2WS intro S3. That's the one we just created. So select that bucket and then click on Save. Well, that was easy. Now we have an S3 repository defined. The next thing you want to do is you want to create a worker configuration, because the way we're going to perform an archiving of the snapshot is N2WS will spin up a worker instance which will actually do the heavy lifting, the archiving into S3. So the way that works is right underneath S3 repositories on the left side of the navigation panel, and we're going to go to worker configuration, click on New. All right. And then I can choose, that's the account, that's the one we've been working with, and I can choose the region where I want to create a worker configuration. Well, that's North Virginia. That's where I'm going to be performing my backups and my archiving. Then what you're choosing here is a configuration that will be inherited by the worker that we're going to spin up. Generally, it's probably easiest just simply to create exactly the same configuration that you chose for your N2WS instance. So in this case, I'm going to choose it. And I'm going to choose a VPC. That would be this one. That's the same one that I chose. And then I can choose the security group. Again, probably the same one that you already used for the N2WS instance, and then the same thing goes for the subnet. Just make sure that you're using the same subnet here as well. And you can go ahead and create a worker configuration for each region where you're performing backups, because this worker configuration will also be used for any file level restores, because that's when we also need a worker. There we go. That's my subnet. And then I can choose to save. Save button, and it's going to save that worker configuration. There we go. Now we're all good to go for North Virginia. Now let's choose how we want that archiving to work. And we're going to do that under policies. So let's move back to the policies. And you probably remember that there was a lifecycle management tab. And the way we do that is we choose the policy, our production policy, going to click on Edit, and over here at the end, that's my lifecycle management. Remember, that's for the snapshots and also the S3. There we go. So now I can turn on the actual archiving into S3. There we go. And now I can also choose, well, how often will this happen? Every second, every third backup that we're performing. And then you can also choose, well, how long will we keep this data in S3? So you can do this either by time or generations or both. The way I'm going to configure it is I'm going to configure it by generations. So I'm going to say I'm going to keep 30 generations of S3 archives. I'm not going to go overboard yet, and I'm not going to choose Glacier quite yet, but that is an option. Let's keep scrolling to the bottom, because here I can now choose which S3 repository are we going to use for this archive. So in that drop down, that's where we see our repository that we defined. And then over here, I can also choose which storage class in S3 do I want to use. The default setting is always standard, which is about 50% of the cost of a regular snapshot. But you have other options here as well. You can also choose infrequent access. Now, infrequent access is a higher savings as far as the storage cost is concerned, but there is a time commitment, which means that you have to retain the data for a certain amount of time within the AWS storage tier, and the setting for that is 30 days. So even if you would delete the data after 15 days, you're still going to have to pay the entire 30 days to AWS. Intelligent tiering is a little bit less rigid. Intelligent tiering means that the data will be stored in standard S3, and then if you don't touch the data for 30 days, it will be moved into infrequent access, and it will stay there till you touch that data again. Then behind the scenes, it will be moved back into the standard S3 and so forth. It can fluidly go back and forth. It's really used for situations where you're not entirely sure if you still need that data or not. But if you're absolutely sure, I'm not going to touch this data, then always go with the infrequent access. Now, in my case, I'm really not planning to keep it for longer than 30 days. I'm right here at the cusp. So I'm going to go with standard. I'm going to click on save. And that is my S3 archiving policy. Now, again, let's try this out. So our policy is already selected, so I'm going to click on Run ASAP. And again, here's our backup monitor, which will show us the progress. So if I select that, here we go. So now we have our backup in progress. Our disaster recovery backup is still pending. And then ultimately, we're also going to have our life cycle status. So just be patient and I would say every couple of minutes or so, click that refresh button to follow what's going on. Always keep in mind that the very first backup and the very first archive, that will take the longest, because every subsequent backup, every subsequent archive, that's going to be an incremental. Okay, so our backup is now successful, and now our disaster recovery is in progress. And let's look right here. Our lifecycle status is now, we are now in progress to store the data in S3. Yeah, I pressed the refresh button, and here we can see now storing to S3 is in progress, and right now we're at 12%. What happens if I press it again? And there it is, 37%. So I just have to be a little bit more patient, and it's going to get stored in S3. Right. So I pressed the refresh button again, and now it's going to tell me that it is now stored in S3. Guess what? As always, let's go back to the dashboard. Well, there we go. Now we also have an S3 archive here as well. That's actually populating all of the different sections within my dashboard now. This is really exciting. Now, let's talk about one more thing. How do we recover from S3? Well, there's nothing new to learn. It doesn't magically become more difficult. It still works exactly the same. So let's go to the backup monitor. And this is the backup set we just produced. So that's now also available in S3. The way that would work is you choose that backup set, you click on recover, and see what it says restore from. Now in that dropdown, we'll actually find the S3 repository. So if we want this data to come from our S3 repository, that's where you would choose that. By the way, if you don't have any more snapshots available because the snapshots aged out, then it's not going to confuse you. It will automatically select the S3 repository. But that's how you can choose that now. And the entire process is as I described before. You can then recover the entire instance from S3. So one more trip back to our dashboard, and this is exciting stuff. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and I'll show you some more features in the next video as well.